Data can tell us so much. It can tell us where the potholes are, how often we change our stoplights, how many cars go over the bridge. In fact, if we're not careful, we may have more data than we know what to do with. But there's a solution. To the count now of about 15 cities, there's a new phenomenon occurring in city government, the creation of offices of innovation. These are offices that are created for the very purpose of collecting and receiving data that helps make more informed decisions, much of what we've been covering so far today. Thanks largely to grants from the Bloomberg Foundation and others, cities are beginning to take advantage of the data that's now available and will be brought to us. Kansas City, in fact, is establishing an Office of Innovation. So let's move right on to our next conversation. What are we going to do with all this data? We're going to be hearing from a few folks that know a little bit about the topic. First, the co-chairman of the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics in Boston, Nigel Jacob, the president of Screampoint, I think we ought to know what that is, from San Francisco, Paul Doherty, from Palo Alto, California, the chief of staff for Code of America, Abhi Nemani, and another Mayor's Institute graduate, this time from St. Louis, Mayor Slay, Mayor of St. Louis, Missouri. And not to have an oversight, we have to introduce our panel chair, Stephen Goldsmith, the director of, are you ready? Director of the Innovations in American Government Program and the JFK School of Government at Harvard University. Welcome. I look forward to your comments.
Thank you. All right, well, welcome. I'm the moderator, so I get to take credit for what's said on my right and left, unless we disagree. I'm going to try to do this as not a series of presentations, but a series of comments and get some interactivity between the audience. I've been messing around with data systems for local government for a few decades, and as a mayor and a deputy mayor, I think I've made more mistakes in this area than probably almost anyone else. But this is a particularly interesting point in time, right, where we've got huge problems that cities have, and we have huge opportunities to solve those problems. And as we kind of think about the discussion today and the discussion you're about to hear, it feels like they're kind of different but converging themes, right? Well, one is big data, right? How do we use data analytics across the enterprise of government in order to unlock value, right? And when I was deputy mayor of New York City, we're trying to figure out, right, where the next person was going to fall down on the street, where the next building was going to burn, which child had worked best with which provider of services when the child was in need of services and the like. So it takes kind of the stat programs of government to a predictive stage, which is enables us to kind of move around our resources. Another way to think about it is, right, and represented on both sides of me here today, is the city not as a provider of services, but a city as a platform for services. How does it make its information available? How does it use its information? Whether that information is for the engagement of community groups or for business development or for entrepreneurs, what's that platform look like? It takes, 311 from a call center to a platform. It takes the cities and states' data from internal use to being externally available for business development. And then I think the last area, and one that's a little bit farther behind, right, is how one uses data as a mayor or city official to provide decision support and discretion enhancement for the field worker, right? Not just how do you get your information on your iPad, but how do you go about making decisions when you're in the field? What are the decision support driven by analytics and the analytics of the HR system in terms of productivity? So on each side of me, we have individuals who are kind of leading the country in that area. And because I was a former mayor and I like to pay attention to mayors, I'll start first with the mayor. So, Mayor, in terms of your dramatic turnaround in St. Louis, give us a few examples of how you've used technology in particular to increase the quality of public services or increase the productivity of public employees.
Well, there's a lot of things, of course, and it ranges everything from trying to prevent crime, making our neighborhoods safer, to communicating better with our citizens, traffic, as well as even communicating with city government in terms of what kinds of jobs are available. We're using technology, and even in the field, on the day-to-day workings of city government. But for example, on crime prevention and reduction of crime, one of the things that we found is that, well, we do know that by using data, we know where crime's occurring and when it's occurring and approximately what time it's occurring. So we can send our police force there. It's called hotspot policing, or in one case, we call it, for violent crime, we call it homicide deterrent initiative. And what it does is it really tracks through data where these crimes are occurring, when they're most likely to occur, and that's when we put our officers and what's happened in our homicide deterrent initiative areas. It's reduced crime by 68%. Within a short period of time, and that was done by the University of Missouri St. Louis. We partnered with IBM and also University of Missouri St. Louis, and they helped us develop this approach that has been very, very successful. The other thing we've done is in terms of just communicating with our constituency. We have many of our departments are on Twitter. So one of which is what we call, the handle is CSB, which is Citizen Service Bureau, STL. And basically what it is, if you have a complaint, if you have a question of a department, you can just run it through the Citizen Service Bureau, and they'll get you a response very, very quickly. The various departments have their own handles, have their own Twitter accounts and pages, and you can go to that and you can get direct information from them as well. On transportation, we just had a huge infrastructure improvement where they shut down our main thoroughfare through St. Louis, which is I-64, and it was for 2 years. They actually shut it down, and what we needed to do is alternative routes for people to get to and get around this major highway in the middle, right down the middle of our city and region. And what we were able to do is, by using technology, we were able to find out, to track the traffic patterns. And in real time, through the signaling, we were able to, and cameras, we can see where the congestion was, and we can remotely change the sequences of the traffic lights to make sure that the traffic ran as smooth as possible. Of course, there were always challenges, but we were able to do that was a big thing for us. And one thing on marketing, one of the things that we talk about is, how does the city market itself? What can we do? People have all these ideas. How do we communicate them, and how do we get them into something that's usable? We have partnered with an organization called Rally St. Louis now, and basically it's rallyftl.com. And I don't have all day to talk, so I'll hurry up and talk about this. There's certainly a lot more stuff we can talk about. But basically what happens is, if you've got an idea about how St. Louis can better market itself, or a good idea that you think our city should be doing, you go on there and you lodge you actually submit your application or submit your proposal, and there's a panel of people that actually review these things, and then they narrow them down to the ones that they think are most promising. Then they put them out to the world and say, okay, anybody that likes these ideas, you can vote on these ideas through your pocketbook. So it's crowdsourcing and then crowdfunding. So, and the ones that get the most funding, I don't think anything like this has been done anywhere in the United States. The ones that get the most funding get enough funding to support the idea. They can go ahead and go forward. And the other ones who don't get enough funding, the people that pledge money for that get their money back. But it's something that just started, but it's a way to help us come up with innovative ideas to market our city in sometimes very small, and we're hoping in some very large ways as well. And finally, of course, just communications is amazing, and through technology, how quickly we can get in touch with people through Twitter, through the email, through I have a blog and a web page, of course, and a Facebook, and all those things that we use to help address issues, to get back to people very quickly. And it has been, I've been in office now 12 years, and I think the amount of communications that have come through my office and through me individually has certainly outpaced anything we could have even dreamed of 12 years ago.
Just on my way to Nigel, let me ask you a really quick question. And just so the rest of the panel realizes, you're mayor, so you get more time than they do.
Yeah, okay.
It seems to me that there's a lot of activity happening in departments where they're using, inside their verticals, are using the communication tools you've talked about. But it seems to me where things often break down is where you need, so the way I've been thinking about it, right, is that government operates vertically, but people live horizontally, right? So you've got to grab information from here and there, and so, you know, do your police officers go where the people are tweeting about a flash mob, or do they go where somebody's calling them, right? And so what are you doing just quickly that helps you kind of bring together data from disparate places for purposes of making those decisions?
Well, first of all, we have, we basically, what we do to make those decisions is we just use common sense. I mean, when you get a lot of information from a lot of people, and you have people in charge looking at this stuff, trying to sift through it and figure out where we need to do it. But for example, on the police department, what we do is we actually look at statistics, and we look at times when these crimes are occurring and where we need to put our cops, and we put them there. What we found is that, you know, intuitively, you think, you know, having cops driving around neighborhoods, that'll make the neighborhood safer, and just waiting for a call, that doesn't work. What does work, and we are measuring the results through University of Missouri St. Louis, which is actually one of the highest rated criminology departments in the nation. They're working with us, and they're assessing the data themselves, and they're working with us to show us how to deploy these different officers and where to put them. And again, they've been very precise, and it's been unbelievably successful. The challenge is to continue to, because it is intensive. It does cost more money to do it this way. The challenge is, you know, making sure that we have the resources to continue funding these things.
So, Nigel, I want to ask you, you can spend about 5 seconds on what you do, but I have a different question for you. So, I'm more interested in your office than the product of your office, right? Because you're almost a national folk hero now in terms of what you've accomplished. So, but you've got the mayor's authority, but you've got this kind of special unit. So just talk a little bit about the structure of your unit, if you would.
Sure. So, so some of the quick and dirty history that led to our group, New Urban Mechanics, was our mayor has always been very sensitive to the fact that cities innovate, or tend to innovate in a very reactive way, at least as his perspective of it has been. And the challenge is that there's no depth to that, right? It's very kind of one-off, and the kind of ideas that you get as a result tend to be fairly lightweight. And so he had a strong interest in devising a capacity in City Hall to develop a pipeline of innovation, right? Where there were projects, approaches of varying depth over a period of time, some of them more quick hit, some of them more longitudinal, sort of longer term. And the question for us was, how do we actually do that? And so when he asked us, a few of us had already been thinking about it, and this has been kind of highlighted a few times already, and you mentioned it also, this issue of risk, right? You tried a bunch of different things. So one of our observations, so I've been with City Hall in Boston for about 6 years, so my co-founder and I have been there both 6 years. And when we looked at why, what are the key stumbling blocks to innovation inside City Hall, what we found, this is also something that's been mentioned previously, it is the culture of risk aversion. And when we dug into that, and really, so we brought in some friends from Harvard, you know, from the Kennedy School, to really understand what that means, what we've learned is that the major risk associated with innovation in City Hall is that is risk to your reputation, right? Most of these senior managers have been working in city government for a long period of time. They've accrued a lot of social capital as a result, and their good name is something that is critical to them. It's critical for them in the budgeting process and just generally. And so when the mayor says to them, go forth and innovate, they get it, right? They understand that. But when they go back to their departments and say to their next layer down in management and say, go forth and innovate, those are the same city officials that are also being leaned on to be incredibly fiscally conservative with money, right? So it's not a good mix, right? So the approach that we've taken is to really look at it and say, is there a way for us to de-risk innovation in city government? And we think that there is, especially since it does seem to boil down to this risk of, this risk to your reputation. So what we've devised in neuromechanics is a process, an approach, essentially, where we can de-risk projects by creating this safe place to innovate, right? So in the private sector, there's lots of different ways to sort of manage the risk of innovation, and there's lots of different ways of sort of putting innovation into discrete buckets, right? Maybe it's your R&D team, or maybe you use sort of lean startup methodology, whatever it is. But in government, it really is, there needs to be this risk transfer. So what we've done is to create this team. It's our team, New Urban Mechanics, which is a safe place to innovate. So,
and you're in the mayor's, I mean, not physically, but you're part of the mayor's
physically,
office.
yeah.
Right?
So we sit right outside of his office. So we're the mayor's office of New Urban Mechanics. We have a small team. There's 2 co-chairs and 5 program managers that sort of handle clusters of areas. But the idea is that anyone can come to us with.
Okay, so let's put this to a test. How many apps have you developed that failed?
4.
And what's the consequence of that been?
Very little, essentially. So the way that we try to manage risk is to keep the investment low, right? So when we think about the cash investment, it's always typically in the sort of the $10,000 to $25,000 range, which is a great number because there is, at least for Boston, there is no other expenditure for that amount that a department can engage in and get anything, right? I mean, that's what you spell in pencils, right? So by partnering with a startup or a research group or a community group with a $25,000, $20,000 investment, and then by scoping a proof of concept around some particular technology or design and getting it out quickly so that we're able to test its efficacy. I mean, does it actually work? We're testing the initial assumptions. We're incredibly efficient. We can be incredibly efficient in learning what works and what doesn't.
So one or 2 quick questions, and then I'm going to turn to Code for America. But do agency directors present ideas to you as if you were an investment committee and you make decisions? What's just a little bit more about the process?
Sure. So the process is, so we're somewhere, it's not really clear exactly what the best analogy for us, for our group is, but typically the way this works is somebody within an agency, from frankly anybody, from anywhere in the hierarchy, can develop a proof of concept idea, a concept, and can come and pitch it to us. And our major filter is, 1, does this positively impact the quality of life in the community? Is this about service, in other words? And 2, do we think that by resourcing this person or this group that they will actually be able to pull it off? So in that way, we do very much think like early stage seed investors, where we're investing just as much in the people as we are in the ideas. But what we bring to the table beyond just sort of financial resource is really human capital resource. So one of the challenges to innovation in government we find is talent, which has also been mentioned previously.
How many data scientists work inside Boston city government?
2.
Are you one of them?
No.
Okay. All right, let me get to Code for America and Abhi. So if Nigel was doing his job right, wouldn't you be irrelevant?
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal for any good nonprofit is to render itself irrelevant.
No. Yeah, well, yeah, but if he did all the stuff he talks about, right? And every city had an urban mechanics, like Philly's copied you and other places, then what value do you add?
So our core goal, like our metric for success, is creating departments like that. So our goal is actually to create more Nigels. So if we could replicate him and put him in a box or something, that'd be great. But for us, what we're learning is that, so just for people who don't know, Code for America, we call ourselves a Peace Corps for geeks. We try to give developers and designers from the Valley who want a chance to do some public service a year-long program to work with cities like Boston and maybe St. Louis in the future, to work with them to develop apps to help them innovate.
Was that a pitch? What was that?
A little bit.
Pitch.
Yeah. I grew up in St. Louis, so I kind of want to work there. But so what we're learning, though, what we're really able to do is help guys like Nigel or other individuals like that who are innovators get the cred, develop apps, show what's possible, and using those examples, be able to institutionalize that kind of innovation, right? So we go to a city and we build an app. So New Orleans, we built an app called Blight Status. And it's an application that helps citizens and the city track the status of blighted properties in the city. It was funny, the mayor went to a CIO earlier before we worked with them and said, I should be able to go to any city, any house in the city with my iPad and know the status of whether it's blighted or not and where it is in the process of the blight jurisprudence. And the CIO was like, that's going to be a 3-year project and cost lots of money. And our fellows went in there, and within 5 months, they actually built that application themselves, right? And that gives the CIO, his name's Alan Square, he's a great guy, the leverage to be able to say, we can try harder things, we can try difficult things, because we've seen it work. And so what we're learning is that this fellowship, this program that we have, is actually really essential to helping change agents like Nigel and Jeff Friedman in Philadelphia develop the ammunition they need to really make a big play.
It seems to, so one of your additional goals, I think, is kind of the open data movement that you're driving. And it feels to me a little bit, and maybe you can comment on this next, that when I was deputy mayor of New York, it felt to me like the transparency movement was really kind of like was separate. I don't want to use any pejorative words, but it was kind of a standalone. It wasn't designed to move from transparency through open source data to community engagement. They stood separately, and often even the ability to write APIs against this information was something that was kind of tangential to transparency. So just real quickly, how do you think about your work versus open data sets versus the transparency movement?
You know, it's interesting when you think about the movement overall. Like, there was a big focus on transparency about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. That's what people kept talking about. Let's open up the data. We don't really work in that space that much. We care about value and ROI, right? What do citizens want? What do the city leaders want? And then let's open up the data afterwards if we have to. And I think that's the evolution you're going to see overall in city to city, that it's not just data for the sake of data. It's data for the sake of value. And what you need are either, you know, the fellows or change agents recognizing what are the services that need to be provided, and then opening up the data to meet those needs.
And before we turn to Paul, your favorite app that you've been involved with at the city level since you've been there?
So I mentioned Blight Status, but I'll say Honolulu Answers is this other one, and it's because something you said earlier, which is, you know, people tend to, cities think about what they do vertically, but citizens think horizontally. So go to any city website. You're going to see department by department by department. But citizens don't think that way, right? They think, how do I get my driver's license renewed? What's the times the post office open till? They don't think about what department each of those services line up into. So we took a city website. We took Honolulu City website.
Yeah, and they don't live in the department. They live in a neighborhood, right? I mean, after all, they don't live in the street department.
Exactly.
They live in the neighborhood.
Yeah. They live in their city. And so what we did is we redesigned the whole website to make it question and answer. So you just say, how do I get my driver's license renewed? And it gives you the answer. It doesn't care about what department you're part of. It cares about answering your problem. And I think that's the normative shift that has to happen.
And you've got all this inventoried on your website, right?
Codeformerica.org.
Right.
Yep.
Are all your apps on his website?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
we have a marketplace for civic innovation called the Commons. It's commons.codeformerica.org that has all of the apps, including everything Nigel's built.
So, Paul, you're on the private sector side, an entrepreneur. It's appropriate you're here because of Kansas City's great relationship with Google and yours as well. I want you play in a lot of different spaces. I want you to explain to the audience a little bit what you do. But let me just take up this question, the last question for a second. I don't know how many agency CIOs are in the audience, but my question doesn't apply to any of you. It seems like the agency CIOs believe that the legacy systems are incapable of participating in this movement when that's not the case any longer. So how do you bring in your cool tools? How do you convince, and you may have a mayor like the mayors that are in the audience, right? The Mayor Slay, Mayor Kansas City, and they may say, okay, let's go do it. And then they go to their agency CIO and says, no, our data is special. It's the legacy data, we can't do it. So how do you overcome that?
Well, there's a couple of ways of doing this. And one of the big ones, of course, is taking into account that there's a lot of big words in IT today. One is called big data. And everyone thinks it's new. Well, the bottom line is it's always been there. And one of the big things that we try to do at Screampoint is to say that there's latent assets that sit inside of every one of the city's agencies. And yeah, you may be using some old iron type of stuff at work, or you may be using some sort of Primavera stuff like we've been seeing and all this other stuff. At the end of the day, there are going to be certain projects and certain apps, like what Code for America does and what Nigel's promoting for his work in Boston, that you need certain data sets. So you're not trying to boil the ocean, but what big data is really about is trying to find that value of the data. Trying to understand that there's business intelligence that is all around us, lots of different ways of accessing data. The key, though, is how do you package that and redo something with it? So when we're working here with Mayor James in his office, with John McGurk and Cindy and Danny and all the good fellows, and also getting feedback from the private sector, guys like Ryan Weber out in the audience out there, and our incubating shop over at Think Big Partners with Herb C. All these guys here in Kansas City are doing something really special. We weren't going to come to Kansas City at all. We're a Silicon Valley-based group, and we were struggling also with working with foreign agencies. Now, for the most part, a lot of them are doing this for the first time, so there's not a lot of legacy data. But we needed to learn how to come back to the U.S. with American innovation after 4 years working it outside. Well, we follow Google. That's the reason why we're here. And what we've discovered, though, was something way beyond Google, and that was a wealth of talent inside the Kansas City region. So much so that what we said to both Mayor Reardon, who we're also working with Brett Diekler out there, who's actually now signing an agreement to be our third-party application development partner. Imagine that, the unified government of Kansas City, Kansas, and Wyandotte County are partners with a Silicon Valley-based group because they're going to be our developers here in Kansas City. This really is Silicon Prairie. And the reason why we're doing that is because, one, there's data that you do not need to boil the ocean. You don't need to go into this big data integration enterprise anymore. Why? Because we have new tools. The whole idea of the cloud, the whole idea of that massive computing lets you use it. The reason why Google Fiber here isn't to get more pictures of grandma for Thanksgiving up on Facebook. It's to do something different. So we want to be one of those things that do something different. One of those is to actually have multiple data streams flowing through a gaming engine so that people can make more accurate decisions. We're not the answer. We're actually even not the workflow engine. That's what the code people do. What we do is we provide that platform for big data to be discoverable. At that point, everyone you in the audience, especially here in Kansas City, have the audacity to dream. Because this is now a future way of no longer having to worry about Excel spreadsheets, and I got this old iron, I don't even have the application to know how to open it. Hey, don't worry about that. The idea of unstructured data is here. The old days of having structured data was waning. It's still going to be there, we've got to deal with it, but at the end of the day, it's called XML. And that's where we've actually gotten our firepower to actually have a real business. The business model that we go in with, it's free to the city. We go in and we actually strike an agreement, a PPP, that allows us to have authenticated data in the back end. What we do is we package that data for value, like what Abhi's talking about, back out to third-party developers, and we have a shared revenue stream. So now you have a non-tax-based revenue stream that creates jobs in your region. We think it's an interesting model, so much so that the city protocol in Barcelona 2 weeks ago, we're now working with them to be the standard across 130 cities around the world, which will now provide benchmarking. And guess what area is going to be the benchmark for North America? Kansas City. So it's a very interesting time right now. I mean, I never thought I'd be here. I'm happy we are, and we're discovering something new every day. There's a lot of work to be done, and I'm just really happy to hear, what's happening over in St. Louis, what Abhi's doing over Code for America, and of course with Nigel. I want your job.
All right, so I'm sure they're ready to do that. Just a comment or two, and then we'll change subjects. I think that one of the issues that's gone unappreciated is the importance of visualization, right? Google knows that through its mapping, but whether it's budget visualization or any, really to some extent what we all do should have a visualization effort. So talk about how you're visualizing your work so that citizens and even agency employees can use it.
Thank you. When we designed Google Earth, that was us. Our technology team was a group called Intrinsic that was actually rolled up into a group called Keyhole, and our friends at Google bought it. That's why we follow Google here. That's our legacy. It was all based on images. And images are kind of sort of cool, but they're inherently dumb. But what a great place to start, because again, that picture tells 1,000 words. But what's interesting about now the newer way of working, especially with gaming technology, imagine SimCity on steroids, that every object has an intelligence behind it. And when you put the two together, there's inherent algorithms that can automatically be created so you can look at information differently. The idea of visualization is not just about getting to grandma's house faster. It's about trying to find what those discoveries are by latent information that's just laying there. And that's where the whole idea of business intelligence really becomes a wonderful tool. Working with our friends at Harvard, my alma mater, over at Stanford University, where they actually make product, usually from Harvard Ideas. I didn't say that out loud, did I?
Can't figure out which one of us was insulted in that. Sure.
But at the end of the day, these people are really coming up with some very innovative ways of now starting to reach down and prove out that when you have visualization, you now have the idea of raising the bar of decision making. You're no longer looking through environmental impact studies this thick of Excel spreadsheets and everything else. We're starting to get there. The mass market is actually pushing a lot of this, and the citizen engagement piece, which has been discussed by everyone here on the panel, I think is probably going to be the key. Internal efficiencies, you as a city, you're supposed to do that. That's your job. But what's really cool is when you can actually take that and have the citizens start to re-engage to change the relationship to a trust relationship rather than something about, well, who's hiding what. And it's not so much about transparency. Again, it's about that trust relationship that's data-driven.
In the Super Bowl in Indianapolis this year, obviously wasn't mayor, but the mayor, in conjunction with some nonprofits and the local organizing committee, employed a group of college kids essentially around the clock. We had 400,000 extra people in downtown Indianapolis for a week, and they essentially participated in the the Twitter discussions, right? They had them curated by where they occurred and the subject. So if people started tweeting about trash or tickets or parking or crowds out of control, then they would participate in the conversation and kind of preempt the 311 or 911 call actually by doing it. Now that seemed like it was really out there until I started to think a little bit, and your comment made me think about it, is that even those social sentiment activities miss the ability for the crowd to participate, right? Because they tend to be bilateral or unilateral and not crowdsourced, right? So I think the next market is how we use the tools to have the community engaged. So here's what I'd like to do. We got about 6 or 7 minutes left. I'd like to go down the line. I want you to ask the mayor, give him either ask him a question, give him a recommendation about the most important thing he could do to make St. Louis better than Kansas City in this area, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, better than Boston. I'm sorry. I forgot that you're bigger than me and my host. I take it back.
I'd rather have the recommendation than the question.
Yeah. I mean, so let's really. I mean, serious. Let's say. So we have a mayor here on Mayor Slay. Wants his city to be best in this area, and all three of you are here because you're experts. Give him a recommendation. I'm going to ask him to respond to it at the end.
So I think we've kind of talked about bits and pieces of this, but I think at the end of the day, the ability to do visualizations and to even think in those terms is done by people. So I would encourage you to create a team that has the skills and the abilities to do that kind of work, and to encourage them to share that as openly as possible. Give them a wide berth in terms of the kinds of things that they take on. Let them be entrepreneurial, but make and cherry pick people. Find people that have not just data scientist backgrounds, but also design. I think design is a hugely underplayed aspect in thinking about this space, and also kind of give them notoriety within the organization and outside of the organization that there is a place that you can go if you are interested in thinking about data in a different way. There are people there that can help you do that. I think that would be interesting.
Great. Next.
If you can keep on beating the San Francisco 49ers, I'd be very happy.
Yeah, okay. Take care of that.
Could you have one that's more technology related?
Fantasy football related.
Okay, we'll write that down too.
Mr. Mayor, I'd probably suggest that we're at this point, just not as a society, but looking for leadership, and it is going to come from cities, and those cities are remarkable in certain areas that need to be celebrated. And most of those have to do with the fundamentals of connecting people, places, and things. And there are going to be tools that are going to come down the pipe that I think can enhance not only that relationship internally within your organization, but also enhance the existing relationship, which is improving all throughout St. Louis. And having been a proud member to actually go into the new stadium, congratulations and all that, and the waterfront, it's wonderful. I just hope that my 2-year-old son in the next 10 years can actually be wowed also by St. Louis. So, Godspeed.
Thank you.
Okay, that's way too emotional to follow up. I don't know.
A little more technocrat answer would be helpful, yeah.
I would recommend don't focus on the tools, focus on the people. I mean, I think, people think that it's all about the technology, that new app that you have to build, and that's great, and I think you should do that, but it's about the people and the culture. And the recommendation would be really think about how you can connect the people in your government to the other change agents and other governments doing this stuff already. The playbook is being written. And you can take advantage of that and not have to reinvent the wheel. And I think getting and pick a person in your technology group or in your mayor's office and say, you're my guy, and you get to do whatever you want, and then connect him to Nigel, connect him to Jeff Friedman in Philadelphia, connect him to John Tova in Chicago, connect him to all the folks in Kansas City. There's a bunch of people that they can connect to, and they become stronger with those connections, and they don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I think the connected city, I guess that's the name of this panel, is not just connected to its citizen, but connected to the other cities.
So, Mayor, you've heard a lot of suggestions. What are the challenges that stand between you and kind of full implementation, and how are you going to handle it?
Well, I think, first of all, one of the main points that hit home with Nigel was that within government, it's set up in a certain way. People are used to doing things in a certain way. Change is difficult. They're very risk averse, I think is something you talked about. Finding the leadership to make the changes necessary, to buy into a broader approach, to step back and see how we can be doing some things differently, but learning from other cities and what's already in place really helps I think us deal with those components. So, you know, I've got a great team in place. We are not, in my office, risk averse, but as you go down and work with people in different sectors of the organization, you find that time and time again. And the other thing I think that I know, and I think was reinforced here, is that if you have a challenge in city government, and you don't know how best to deal with it, there's probably an app for that. And you know, that's okay. I didn't even know what an app was 12 years ago, and it's amazing all the new innovations that are out there, the opportunities that are available, and it's going to, for somebody like me, it's going to take assistance and ideas from people like you to be able to, you know, realize what the opportunities are and then help put those into place. So thank you.
So my thanks to the panelists. I mean, one of the things that the conversation brings home, I think, is that it's the convergence of these tools, if you want to use that word, right? It's you know, we have mobile tools in the hands of our workers. We have big data analytics. We have the ability to visualize data. Right? We have the ability to crowdsource so that communities can actually participate in solving their problems with government. And we've got, in many mayors' offices, the connection of the open source app world, app developers augmenting with the city activity, and the city actually transforming itself to, from an organization that tries to do everything and can't, to an organization that is creating a network and facilitating and catalyzing the network for success. So please help me thank our panel for this session. Thank you very much. Thank you.